Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video about Hans Niemann openings. In today's video we are going to examine all openings that we didn't discover in the previous video. For those of you who didn't watch the previous part, I'm gonna put a link in the description so you can firstly cover that and then jump straight forward to this one. Anyway, you can also watch this one first and then just continue with the first part. And also I would like to thank you for biggest support in the recent period. Like last couple of weeks were amazing. I got a lot of subscribers, likes, comments, and actually a lot of feedback from you. So I want to thank you for that. So in this video, we are going to examine Caro-Kann, Modern Defense, Philidor, a bit of Italian. You know that Hans is playing very complicated Italian games, so I'm going to do my best to explain it, and also I'm going to provide some lines of mine. So let's start and jump straight forward to the video. So when we talk about the Caro-Kann, that's first opening we're gonna examine. When Hans is playing against Caro-Kann, usually he's playing this trendy line with knight f3, and when they respond with a typical d5 second move, we play the move d3. So the point of this setup is kind of to attract black to enter the endgame, which arises after d takes, and queen takes d1, and king takes d1. Many players are entering this endgame as Caro players that not even considering what's the plans here for black and how white can take control of the game. Black is having practical problem when it comes to the dark squares, like usually c5, e5, a5, b6 weaknesses can appear, especially when they push this pawn. And that's how white is taking the advantage in this variation. For example, there is a lot of players here playing something like bishop g4, in which case we're gonna just like unpin ourselves with developing of this bishop. You know that when it comes to queen trade, the castling is not even important, so king on d1 is not at all in danger. So at this point, I'm seeing a lot of players are just playing something like knight e7 or just going knight f6 here, normal developing moves. When it comes to these moves, especially against knight e7, there's a fantastic approach of going knight e1, trading this bishop, and after something like e5, which is very natural, we are playing knight to d3, then we are going f3, knight to d2, knight to c4, and this is something that I mentioned at early part of the video, where you're having a decent control on the dark squares, especially when they push e5 or a5, so these knights will be immortal here. What can happen, like f6 for example, then a4 is a very useful move because taking the space and also stopping b5 against the idea of knight c4. When it comes to knight c5, we can just take this, and after take we play knight d2. This knight can come to c4, this knight can also go to b3, followed by if bishop b6, a5, a6. Bishop comes to e3, rook comes to d1. You can also advance this pawn a little bit if you need, and white is having a more comfortable game than black in this scenario. Yeah, it's about the endgame. So in case of something like knight f6 and then g6, which also appeared in some of mine games, I had very nice game in this variation, knight bd2, now g6, knight e5, very important move, because you're not really going anywhere to attack the king or to do anything crazy. You're going actually back to d3. Like you went in the earlier variation, knight e1, knight e3, here you go knight to e5 and knight e3. Earlier on, we couldn't do that because knight was on d7, as you see, so we cannot jump knight e5, that's why we went knight to e1. So here after g6, knight e5, usually what they're playing are something like bishop to g7, or, which is even also interesting move, is this move bishop to h6, f3, for example castles, and now a4. So the point of bishop h6 is whenever you move this knight to c4, they are going to trade this bishop, which is not the end of the world, of course. Like something rook d8 for example, then we can do knight to d3. If they try something like c5, they can even more create weaknesses here after trading. Then this pawn is in big trouble because knight is hitting it, and if b6, then they could have the problems later with a5. Our plan is to go maybe something like c3, king c2, bishop e2, put the rook on d1, and have very interesting game. If they go bishop g7, we can just go knight e3, castles, for example, c3, put the king on c2 as usual, play f3 to create a nice wall in the center, and then push the other pawn again to control more stuff here, to plan with knight c4, followed by some bishop e3, bishop e4, and just organize our pieces this way. And later on, we are fighting in the middle, and there could be some tricks, of course. It's not a position where tactic doesn't exist. It actually, there's some ideas, but depends also how black organize his pieces. Also, there is some way of playing like bishop to e6, trying to stop any knight c4 later. In that case, we can just play knight to d3. For example, knight b7, f3 or g3 can be also played. g3 here, it's an interesting move because since bishop is here, it's not going anywhere on b7. Then in that case, we can organize later on potential press on c6. If we achieve all these moves, that would be amazing. For example, bishop h6, bishop g2, longside castles, b3, bishop goes to b2, king can go on e2. We can play f4 later also, why not? Maybe h3 before that to stop any knight g4 or bishop g4. And yeah, this knight is not in the game at all, since he cannot jump anywhere forward. And also he can't go on b6. I mean, he can go, but in that case, knight is completely restricted on this side. So yeah, that's about this interesting variation. What can also happen here early is maybe they can play something like f6, trying to immediately play the move e5, but after a4 and after a5, that's also the biggest point. Like, you're playing a4 to even grab more space with a5. So later on, when your knight jumps on c4 and d3, then this can support additionally all these dark squares and have a very big control on the queen side. That's what we want. So yeah, some crazy stuff here doesn't exist so much. Then we can move on the second popular line, and that's line with bishop g4. So here, when you play the move d3, there is also very popular line bishop g4. Like, people are playing it very often. They don't want to trade the queens. In that case, we are playing h3, trying to kick this bishop out of the way, and if they take, we take back with queen. After e6, and now they got some sort of French structure without bishop on c8, which is amazing for black in the long run, but we are not going to place the pawns on e5 and d4. There is no need for that. In this case, we are doing the plan of g3, putting the bishop on g2 and going castles. What is our long-term plan? We would like to go, we can go both knight e2, knight c3, followed by queen e2 and then f4. And in that case, we're gonna have amazing attack on the king side. Depends also what is black doing. For example, let's say they play something like bishop to e7. We can play knight to c3. Any d4 can, you know, regroup the knight this way, or any d4 can just we can thankfully say knight b1, thank you so much. Now our knight can go on c4, or after moving the queen here, our knight can go on f3. So we provoked d4, we provoked block center, and that's amazing for us. So after going castle here, we're having so solid position. I think that any sort of e5 can just lead to take, and knight c3, which puts the pressure here. Also here, I think black's interest is to keep position closed, so he doesn't want to allow bishops to get so dangerous on these diagonals. At the same point, they can go bishop h5. In this case, I'm recommending you to go queen e2. So now you don't want to trade the queens. Like, if you play something like g3 now, then after taking, you're actually entering the trouble by queen takes d1 and then bishop takes f3, so that's not good. If you play something else, like maybe bishop e2 here, they can still take, and after take here, maybe they can even double take here and then push e5 later. This position is not so much convenient for white. That's why we are playing here to move queen e2, avoiding trades. After something like e6, g4 is the point. So we are going aggressive here, followed by bishop g2. This bishop on g6 seems like a solid piece. It's putting the pressure on e4, but at the same time it's closed. What can happen, like let's say they play something like knight to d7. knight to c3. And they have a problems because they cannot go now bishop d6, since if this happens we can simply take the pawn on d5 and win the pawn. Queen a5 doesn't exist, we can just go back and we're just pawn up. So knight e7 maybe doesn't make sense, maybe bishop d6 makes more sense. In this case, if we go now knight c3, they can play knight e7. Like knight f6 here maybe something what they don't want to play, because it's usually under target of some e5, g5. So I think maybe that's the best plan what they can do. We can play bishop d2 here, for example, knight to d7. We can play knight c3, threatening on d5. They can play knight to e7. And here we can even make alongside castles. But maybe we don't need to commit that too early. But the idea is, when they do something like queen b6, to play d4. So now the tensions are big in the center. Still, it's hard for them to say they're castling short. There is some h4, h5, and more attack there. If they go on the long side, then like same side castling is not too much dangerous for us. If they try some c5 here, they need to deal with e takes d4. This is, I think, not good for them because they're still losing the pawn. They're pinned on the e line. So that's the whole point of this variation. Like, you can keep flexible, you can go castle short, you can go castle long, but I think you can always stay in the middle. Don't play any e5, don't help them, because then in the long run this pawn on e5 can be a weakness. I think they have perfect pieces to attack your pawns. So even if you go something like e5, bishop c7 followed by c5, knight c6, you're gonna feel very bad about pushing this pawn earlier. So yeah, that's the plan. For example, in case of knight e7, knight c3, let's say they play knight gf6 here, we can short castle here, bishop e7, and now fantastic plan, which we can see also in other type of position similar like this, is the move knight e1. The point is simple. You want to push f4, f5, close this bishop, even trap it if it's possible. That's why they are seeing this plan, and they should open up the center. With d takes e4, we take back, and now e5, block our d of f4. But now we are focusing on this pawn here. We can also target it many different ways. If you put the other knight on c4 somehow, then that can be additional pressure. Also, I guess a4, a5 is very nice, followed by also h4, h5 could be just nice trapping idea. Let's say castles, bishop e3, normal developing moves, and something like this. Queen f2, rook d1, interesting point, maybe stacking the rooks on the d line. Maybe we don't even need to care about b5 here, since then they will create other weaknesses and the d line is open. Pushing f4 is hard for us, because if we push f4, then we're gonna make them nice pressure on the e4, so that's the reason why we are playing here. Maybe we can do something like bishop h3 followed by opening with g5. That could be a nice idea, and here white has a very pleasant edge. So in this popular line with bishop g4, remember that you're going h3, and one of the most popular ways how they're playing is take, and now e6, we go g3 and put the bishop on g2. If they go bishop h5, we play queen e2, and then when we see what they're gonna do, like e6, then we go g4. If they play something else, like for example knight e7, in that case we can even take maybe on d5 and then go g4 now, followed by knight c3, because the problem for them now is they can't push e6, since we again have knight takes d5. And if they go something like this, we have g5 and then taking here. So practically speaking, they're in some move order trouble in this scenario. So yeah, e6 is very natural. I'm not seeing anyone playing knight e7, but just to mention here. Okay, the other line that's interesting to mention is when people are playing here the move g6. That's maybe one of the most challenging lines in terms of just keeping pieces on the board, and reminding me on this King's Indian attack setups, because we are going to put a queen on e2, play g3, bishop g2, and we are creating this King's Indian attack. But they have g6. So after queen to e2, bishop g7, g3, knight f6. Knight f6 is not a convenient move, but looks very realistic to happen in the game. At that point, we are always pushing e5, trying to get the tempo, and also to create this typical e5 blockade, followed by castles through q1, bishop f4, to create just amazing game, and to play against this bishop on g7. For example, c5, c3, also trying to play d4. For example, knight c6, targeting more on e5, we play d4, focusing to stop that. In case of castles, we castles back, and if they push something like f6, we can always close with e6. And now the problem for them is they don't have any knight f8, they don't have any knight f6, c5, e5, so they need to do something back. And then in that case, because they are very close, this pawn was hanging, we can take it. Like opening up here is useful for this bishop, but then that creates a hole here on e5, so we can use it again with our pieces. I think that's not good for them in the long run. If they try to do that immediately with f6 here, you can just castles, and like if they take it here, you can take it back and try to play for compensation, but what even works better is this move knight g5. So if they castle, it's obvious that they're losing on the spot with bishop takes d5 check, or just knight e6. So they can do that, they need to play something like knight f8 to defend it, but that's a little bit passive. And now we take on e5. Taking on e5, it's definitely risky, because if the knight takes, we have something like bishop f4, rook e1, and just huge pressure on the e line. Just practically speaking, they're gonna be in a lot of trouble. Taking with bishop just doesn't make sense to me also. Practically speaking, it's very ugly to take something in the middle with bishop. If they try h6 here first, then we just go back, defend the pawn. If they pin us, we just try to kick this bishop out of the way. Of course, they're gonna take us. And as you see, we just simply don't care about a pawn on e5. This pawn is not important for us, since that's also the interference for our rook on e1. e6, queen e2, trying to push f4 maybe. When they take it now, finally, we play bishop f4 again, and then we just try to quickly strike in the middle. Since the knight on f8 is blocking castles, we are creating the target on e6, and our knight will jump here, followed by something like this, and yeah, we are just practically better here. Yes, so when we go g3 here, knight f6, I'm telling you that not the best move, but that's something what usually people are maybe playing so quick, thinking like, okay, I have a square on knight d7, but better for them is to do something else. Like I'm seeing people are doing also this move e5, which is a little bit challenging, but it's also hard for black to understand the theoretical part here. We take on d5, they go bishop g4. This is pretty much the only move, because if they don't do that, we are simply, if they take back here, we are simply winning the pawn. And if they take back with queen, we have quick development with knight c3, bishop g2, and this is not good for them. So that's why bishop g4 only move. Now we take on c6, black is sacrificing the pawn for some compensation. Now important is to not allow knight e4, that's why we place here c3, they play knight g7, we're trying to kick this bishop back, they go back here, and we know these kind of structures where usually black is having the c7 pawn. It's very familiar, but now they don't have it and they're trying to compensate that since we don't have development. But we are easily achieving our development, knight b2, for example, castles, bishop g2, queen d7. The point of this is also they are stopping us from castles, as you see, with queen d7. Now we go knight e4, and we are trying to do something like knight g5, followed by castling. b6, also stopping knight c5, and now we have this amazing developing move and also sacrifice, so they can't take us because we have knight f6 here, it's winning. So f5 is pretty much logical response here. We just trade here. They need to take here. I think if they take on g7, we have something like knight g5, and now we have a threat on bishop. And if we win this bishop, pretty much that's game over. And we're also threatening on e5. So that's why they need to take on e4. I'm telling you, this is very forced. We take on e5, and we have this crazy trade where by the end of the day, white is good, but you know, could be intense with this pawn on d3. Yeah, very forcing line, but this is something that black can do only if he's aware of this move bishop g4. Otherwise, this move doesn't work for them. What they can do also, like knight h6. This is also a natural move. We do bishop g2, castle, castle, rook e8. They're trying to push e5. That's why we stop them with our move e5. f6, challenging move of the pawn. We are ignoring that, of course. We don't want to take it. And also they want to do some bishop g4, so that's why we are playing the move h3 to stop any jump or any pin on g4 with their bishop. Knight e7, challenging the pawn on e5. We play d4, so we are still ignoring it. When they take, we take with pawn. We are keeping the bishop on g7 closed. e6, and now you can play this position many different ways. As we are having the space, we don't want to trade so much pieces, but in this scenario, when we take on h6, they take back. After knight bd2, if we somehow manage to strike with f4, this bishop will be permanently closed. And then imagine our knights are taking control of the dark square center while this bishop is completely out of the game. For example, b5, rook fe1, b4, they're trying to get some space on the queen side, knight f1, and also we are planning to maybe retreat this knight back followed by h4, or this knight will just come here trying to strike the king side. What can arise? Some example, for example, h4 here, queen d4. Maybe this is from some game, and in this position, as you see, this bishop is closed. You don't need to play this way strictly. You don't even need to give up this bishop with bishop h6. You can maybe do bishop g5, but the point of bishop takes h6 is to not allow this knight to come on f5 maybe, or to f7 to press here more. That's the whole point. Yeah, as I told you, g6 is challenging move, contains the play on the both wings and on the both sides, so that's why this Caro-Kann line is very static. A lot of people are committing to this early take and just going for the endgame, but if they want to fight, they can play the move g6. Okay. There is also one other line that they can play, is after d3, there is a very interesting move, queen c7. And against queen c7, they want to take now on e4, so that's the point of playing the move queen c7. They want to take on e4, and when you take back, just to not trade the queens and to play this middle game, they're going to push e5 and so on. I see that Hans in this position is playing the move g3 and going bishop g2, but I think he didn't study this too much. Maybe he did, I don't know, but I don't understand the point of playing now g3, because after take and something like e5, like what's the point of playing g3 if your bishop is now available to go on the other side? So yeah, he also doesn't have so much games against queen c7, and I think that he didn't know about the idea of taking on d5, which I recommend here. Taking back and now just going c4. Just strikes the center immediately and get completely open things on the board. So, for example, if they play knight f6, this is the main move. There is also option to play e6, but in this case we can just develop the knight c3, targeting the pawn, bishop b4, trying to pin, they can take, they take back, and now we have this interesting move, queen a4. So practically speaking, we still didn't play d4, we don't have it yet. If we do have this move, I think we are much better, because our bishop can get out. Knight c6, a3, when they take, so practically speaking, bishop pair on the board. If we open up everything, white will be just, practically more comfortable. Knight f6, we play bishop e2, bishop g4, we just castle. Bishop pair is bishop pair. Maybe we don't have space yet, but at some point when we push some c4, d4, trying to open up rook b1 and put a pressure on these weaknesses, that's enough for solid practical advantage. So if they try to do knight f6 instead of e6 here, we can still play knight c3, followed by d takes e4, we just take back, and since we control d5, they need to be careful about that. a6 is stopping any knight b5. It's a useful move, but is this the best option for them to play a pawn move while all pieces are staying in the back rank? It's very questionable. And now g3. Multifunctional move, preparing bishop f4 and also bishop g2, which is amazing according to this diagram. Bishop g4 pins the knight. Bishop g2, sacrifice of the pawn. But is it possible to take? Not, because there is this amazing move 95. So we are striking both bishop on g4 and the following queen on c4. If they take our queen, I think that's game over, because after take of the queen, we have this knight b6 move next. Also, we have this bishop b7. We also got this bishop f4 later, and they're in a massive trouble. So that's why queen e6 here, and after queen e4, knight b7, f4. King is weak in the center, bishop is not out. We are going castles next, even to eliminate this bishop later. Pawn on b7 is hanging, and we are just much better. So maybe e6 is better approach, to not trade on c4, since that's opening up the position. Then still we can go just g3. Let's say they play bishop b4 now, trying to pin something. We can play bishop g2, completely ignore that. Let's say they castle, so we castle ourselves. And if they still decide to open up the center, like usually it's very convenient when it comes to breaks, we just take our bishop out on f4, targets the queen, queen needs to move, and now we just keep pressure. Knight f4, then we take on c4, queen is again moving, then another attack on the bishop. So we sacrifice the pawn, but move after move we are attacking some of their pieces. Bishop e7, now knight e4. We have maybe some threat of queen trap with fall of rook c1. Knight b7, rook c1, queen a6. So all pieces are out, and they pieces are cramped for sure, and there is no specific way how they're gonna develop their pieces. Like if e5 here, we have knight f5, and after bishop d8, bishop e3. So look at this position, it's completely cramped. Reminds me of these Catalan positions where usually white sacrifice the pawn and play for a slow advantage with a lot of pressure. So yeah, against this queen c7 line, you can just take on d5, they take back, and you can just strike the center with d4. Don't play here the move d4. You can transpose in this very good version of queen c7 lines, where they block you of playing the move bishop f4 in this exchange variation. And also they can go for bishop g4 now, followed by knight c6, knight f6, and get very easy card of structure. So since you didn't play d4, c4 is amazing approach, and try that in your games. With this thing, we are now finishing with Caro-Kann lines, so we can move on the next thing. And that's Pirc's modern defense. This is something we didn't talk in the last video, so we're gonna take a look at some lines and how actually to play against Pirc and how Hans is doing that. Usually Hans against this opening is playing very normal setup, very natural setup, like everyone is doing usually. Here, black can always play bishop g7, but if they want to commit for knight f6 early, this is transposing into just Pirc's defense. Bishop g7, this is still modern approach, like keeping cards open on the table. Like this is the most aggressive and the best way for black to play modern defense, to play bishop g7, then a6, then later on to go knight e7, to push b5 and so on. But if they commit for knight f6 early, very important is to go bishop e3, not knight f3 now. Against bishop g7, it's better to go knight f6, knight f3. So let's cover firstly knight f6, since this is more popular, more easier to come in your games. You play bishop to e3, they go bishop g7, now you go queen d2. You have a simple plan of going bishop h6. When they do something like knight g4 here, trying to stop you, this is a bad move because your bishop goes to g5. If they try to counter your bishop safely comes to g3, and now they create a weakness on g5 and the hook. So after that, f3, h4 will happen, and they're just completely weakening the king side, which is not good for their king. If you try something like e5, you can just close with d5, and this bishop on g7 is just permanently closed, and the pawns are not dangerous at all. Like if they try h5, we have h4, like something like bishop h6 to try to open up this bishop. We can move the queen out of the way, and the next move is f3, kicking this knight, and we're just doing an amazing job. Like something like this can happen. This is a nice trick because after take they have this, but also they need to understand that queen f6 is not blundering the knight. So a little bit hard moves for black. On the other side, I'm seeing many players here are already confused what to do. If knight e7, we can just hit with h4 instantly, and this opens the diagonal for our bishop, while this pawn is also weak, knight is misplaced, and game is just much better for us. So knight g4 is not a good move here, just to tell you immediately. This is something you don't have to be scared about. I'm seeing more often castles here, which is also not a great decision to commit castles that early. That means that we can commit castles early on the long side. And now the typical approach is to play c6 and then to go b5, followed by queen a5, b4, and then try to give you a checkmate on the long side of the board. The problem is that we are faster on the king side, and how we are doing that, we are playing f3. Firstly, we need to defend that pawn, because usually when they play b4, the simple trick is that they want to destruct our knight by taking the pawn on e4 later. h4. Queen a5, king to b1. b4, knight from g to e2. This is the safest way of playing this position. Why? Do not develop any piece from the king side. I mean on the knight and the bishop on e2, just because when this b4 happens, you want to have the returning square for your knight to come on c1 to control a2. So when something like bishop e6 happens, you have the move knight to c1 to control a2. And for example, if knight from b to d7, we play h5. On knight takes h5, we can play bishop h6. After returning the knight, followed by g4, this is already very scary for them. They don't have enough resources of defending the king side. If they try to go for the typical idea of rook b8 followed by knight b6, knight f4, knight c3, this is the only attack that they have. You are completely safe with this knight on c1. When they come on a4, you can simply just go knight b3 and you're totally safe. On the other side, while they're developing their plan, you can just take on g7, king takes queen h6, king g8, and now something like knight h3. Most probably you're looking to kick this knight somehow out of the way. You have plenty of ways, but also knight g5 and knight h7 is a straightforward checkmate. If they go here knight f8 to defend this h7 square, now we got e5 since they play c5. If they don't play c5 here, I don't know what they can do actually. Like how they're making a break. If this knight goes into defense, then who is going to attack you on the king side? That's the problem. If they don't play c5, then how are they going to attack you? To return the queen back, but that's also risking some moves like a f4 and e5. So anyway, they're going to get checkmated at some point. So I think even better approach here is instead of going f3, okay, maybe you can go f3, but after b5 to go instantly the move bishop h6. Just because when you reach this position here, they have option of playing h5 themselves. And that's why it's important maybe to go earlier the move bishop h6. At this point, this is also very good for white. Position is just amazing anyway. You even have the plans of g4. And after they take to play h5. Like, just don't be scared of their defense with h5. You have resource of sacrificing, but it's a little bit riskier because, you know, you are opening still the king side, but if they manage to defend, then these pawns could be dangerous in the long run in the endgame because you just gave them up. So bishop h6, your plan is to go e5 and then queen g5. That's one threat. Like rook d8, e5, takes and queen g5. So it looks like game over, but they have knight e8. And now you take on h5. Your plan is to go bishop takes g7 and just queen h8 checkmate. Bishop f6, trying to avoid that. And this position looks still over, but after f takes g4, and this is important move to know. Otherwise, if you try any bishop g5, they can still go back bishop to g7. Also, they have some knight to e6. In that case, you're playing your knight to... Sorry, bishop to e6, you're playing the knight on c1, controlling a2. So this is important approach if you want to allow this h5 move. But to not allow that move, just go earlier, like somewhere around f3 when they play b5, now go bishop h6. On b4, just go knight c2. On queen a5, just go queen b1. And bishop e6, you have knight c2. And now the point is when you go h4, there is no h5 since your bishop is here. And any sort of take here, you just take back with your queen. If they try to trade the queens, you just move your queen somewhere back, like on d2, hits this pawn. After some a5, I think you can already start pushing your pawns with h4, g4, and so on, and queen cannot come back anywhere. I think after h4 you're threatening to trap the queen because you're controlling this and this, and there is no escape. So if they sacrifice the pawn, then you can just, I think, on a5 you can just take on b4. I think this is a free pawn. You don't have to be scared of opening the b line. And anyway, I think you can go to try something like g4. Maybe not now, maybe just to take on b4, like I said, because knight a6, I think you can just take it, they take back, and you can now maybe go g4. Or you can just develop your knight and have a nice game. The attack on the queen side just doesn't exist. So this is the plan. If they commit an early knight f6, you can organize your attack with bishop e3, queen d2 alongside castles. But when we talk about bishop g7, this is slightly different, because now they didn't play the knight f6. It means this bishop can support this diagonal, and the attack of a6, b5, b4, and so on can be dangerous. Usually they're also planning to play bishop on b7. So it's a little bit different approach for black. In that case, we're playing knight f3, a6, bishop e3 now. And here I'm seeing a lot of players are just striking immediately with b5. In which scenario, I like to strike on the other side with h4 back. The point of that is you just want to play h5 and then even h6 to provoke this bishop to go back home, which gives you space, neutralize this diagonal. And if he goes on f6, he will be exposed later. So that's why many players here are committing h6 early, trying to meet h5 with g5. But this puts a very nice strategical idea for white, that when this thing happen, you'll see in a few, like let's say bishop d3, defending the e4 pawn. You don't really care about b4 happening as usual, you know. Let's say bishop b7, that's also the point of bishop d3, defending the pawn. You go a4, also trying to provoke the weakness on c4, so you can use it later in the future. Knight e7, h5, g5, and now knight g3. So creating the weakness here, and then planning to put your knight on f5. Pretty much the only move to stop that is e6, and this looks like some hypothalamus opening, I think that's the name. When they place the knights here, bishops here, but pawns seems a little bit exposed. And now c3 is nice move, trying to control the center a little bit more. They take, you take back with the b pawn, and after knight e7, just castles. So this is not a weakness. g4 doesn't do anything, even helps you. So you can go knight h2 and tuck the pawn. If they go something like c5, you can, you know, useful move is to put the rook into the game and get out of this diagonal, for example. And when they go something like queen c7 defending it, there is a very nice approach going knight h2 anyway, because you want to strike with f4 and you also want to put your pieces into the attack on the king side. Castling here is just not good because f4 and the king side is getting open. So I'm not really sure where the black king is going to be if they don't castle, but if they castle, this happens. We take with rook, they go on the other side, we play here because we would like to attract something on h6. If this happens, just go sacrifice, take on h6, put a queen into the game, followed by knight g4, and the game is over. The f7 is hanging, this diagonal gets open, you can go rook f1, and there is even some ideas of sacrificing on b7 if that distracts the queen from some defense. And that's game over. So after knight h2, if they don't go castles, let's say they do something else, like I think f5 is not that much good for them. Okay, firstly now it's not possible because we can just take, and that's why in the earlier scenario when they castle, they're now maybe threatening to go f5. That's why f4 is very powerful and just not allowing that to happen at all. What he can do if they decide to take, I think that's also opening the other side of the board, so we can also just play something like this, and if we need a pressure on the queen side, this can happen. I think any sort of d5 can just close the game with e5, and the opposite, if they go e5, we can close the game with d5, and we have a very easy game. Knight g4 is amazing, f5 will be a weakness, and so on. So I think that's not a good option for them. Like h6 is smart move, but in the long run you can see how you can punish it. Bishop b7, h5. So we are planning to push h6, b4, and now important idea is to go knight e5. Taking here for them is definitely not good. I'm seeing that a lot in the games and playing something like knight f6. In this case, like h6 is definitely a move, like just putting this bishop out of the game, stopping castles. And now this pawn is not even a problem here. You can just normally develop your pieces, trying to look for the center. I think move such a bishop g5 is very possible because it's putting the long-term pressure on this pawn. And if you really need to defend that pawn, you can just go something like bishop to c4 here, why not? Followed by queen e2, bishop g5, longside castles, put rook on e1, and just permanently punish this bishop on f8. White is just much better. So that's why here, after this, usually they're kicking this knight out of the way. And at this point, you can just take the pawn here. Bishop e4 here. Again, I'm telling you that usually taking something in the middle with bishop is suspicious while other pieces are not developed. Knight g5, bishop e7, d5, like already some attack happens in the middle. If they close it, we have bishop c4, supporting additionally this pawn, and who knows, maybe some tactics gonna appear. We have also ideas of queen f3. And at this point, after h6, we got nice sacrifice, and that's h takes g6. I think it's connected with, if they take on g5, do we trade the rooks first? They go back, and we go something like queen to h5. And then we threaten here, and then we threaten here, and that's game over. Also, we're threatening here. Yes, that's a very nice trick. So you see, in case of bishop b7, you're jumping on d5, and they don't have everything. Like, they cannot have everything. If they try knight f6, anyway, h5. If they take on h5, we have knight g5. So we are planning again maybe to do something about this. If they go back, we have e5. And I think this is some crazy variation where even if they manage to survive, like without queen seems less dangerous for black, we still got a lot of pressure. Knight e5, threatening knight c7. They can't castle, we have knight to e7 also. If they try to defend with more of this, then there is another sacrifice with g4. And what's the point if the bishop takes? Do we have something like... Just bishop e2? No. I know that there is some tricks with checkmate on d8 in these positions, but currently now I'm stuck, just to tell you. I need to turn on the engine. I don't know about this position. When I analyzed, I forgot what is the point about this. So let me see what engine says here. Why it recommends so much sacrifice. Bishop d4. And what is this about? If I take... you take back, and oh yeah, now there is a double threat. Take here and take here. Oh yeah, this is not easy move to find. And also if they take the rook here, you just take on e5, you threaten the rook in the corner. You're threatening just to take back, you're threatening here, you're just threatening everything. Oh yeah, so yeah, that's the trick. Not so hard, but it's also not so much easy. Anyway, I think you don't need to go that much crazy with this variation of h5. But it's actually definitely good, as you see. Just go h5 and the game is not easy for them at all. So, yeah, that's about this modern defense approach. I'm trying to see from a different move order what's happening here. What if they go knight e7, for example, without b5? In that case, h4 is always useful. Like, usually h4 is very useful. And when you play h4, if they respond with something like h5, this is always permanently allowing you to control the g5 square, and simply any f6 can be dangerous. Firstly, here it's not possible, we just win the game on the spot, but generally f6 never possible because creating the weaknesses around the king. If e6, then we can just stop b5 now. After knight e7, we can just play bishop e2. Like if they go here b6 followed by bishop to b7, this is classic heap opening. In that case, we can like create the nice shelter with the pawns in the middle and go alongside castles. On b5 we can close it, we don't even need to open it. And okay, when the castle short, of course some rook dg1 and g4 will arise and game will be over if we open up these lines. I guess on any e5 we close with d5, and opposite if d5 we close with e5, so we don't react in the middle, and also we don't provoke anything. c5 is not possible, we just win the pawn, so that's brilliant strategy from us. So on h4, again, h6 is maybe more convenient, just to not create a g5 weakness. Then queen d2, knight gf6, e5. Famous attack. Whenever the knight on f6 comes, we can always consider this move e5. And now this is an interesting line where we are sacrificing the pawn, but just because of this whole tension around the king, we know that this knight f8 move is usually interfering all ideas of black, castling short, also making a piece very passive and so on. We can just simply ignore what's happening now, go alongside castles, they're gonna provide c6, we go bishop f4, queen b6 and rook e1, so there's a lot of tension here on the board, and they have a lot of problems with these pawns here, and definitely they're not in a good shape here. White is better. Like, white is better, but also there is no close win here. You need to be careful in how you break through. Is it with some sacrifices of d5, or you go some knight f4 followed by c4, c5, and so on. Anyway, for black it's really hard to move, to create any moves, but you also need to be careful with your ideas. Like maybe some knight e4 can happen, followed by some sacrifices on d6, since the king is in the center. That's useful to tell. That's about modern Pirc. And now, very interesting version of Pirc in modern is of course Philidor, which is very static opening, and it's opening for itself since it's not coming with any g6. Philidor is something also I played myself, and against Philidor there's a lot of options how to play. Hans is playing also main line here, bishop c4 followed by castles. This is very natural, everyone is playing that. But what I also see that he is playing is the move rook g1, which is also I'm doing myself, and I can tell you this is one of the best weapons now against the Philidor. Since black is completely surprised about this new, people currently now, they are aware of this move, but they're still not finding the great solution. If they're trying to play g6, which is something I've seen myself a lot of the time, trying to play sort of Pirc, but now since you commit with rook g1, now your ideas with later h4 is simply not existing. So we are going bishop to e3, they're playing something like bishop g7, and the point is to take on e5 and then to launch g4, because if you go g4 immediately, they have this nice idea of taking here, you take back, and now playing knight c5. And you have some practical problems, because you have a hole on f3, and also typical idea for them is to go quickly castle, put the rook on e8 and push d5. So that's why you have to take first as the best and then play g4. So you're opening the line for your queens, but at the same point you're playing on long run, so on positional advantage, because this bishop is awful together with this knight, not in the game. Knight could be maybe better on some other spot than this 7. This bishop is not in the game, and after castles we are going queen d3 by alongside castles. c6, typical move for these structures. They castle, we castle long. Rook e8, very natural move, protects the pawn and prepares to reroute this bishop on the other side. And now we go h4. So we are not looking for h5 here. We just want to secure the option for our pawn on g5, because our main move here is g5. Yeah, looks a little bit ugly, because then the knight can safely later come to f4, but this is what we want. We would like to trade the queens here if they accept, and to play on the endgame advantage. Since we got a d line first, they have some weaknesses, like a e5 pawn is always on target. We would like at some point to play the bishop on h3 if possible, and just to put a pressure on the line. We have options of rerouting the knight to c5 later, and we are not really scared of any bishop f8, we just retreat the rook on d2. If knight c5, a4, for example on rook b8, we play b3, then king b2, and this is a waiting game, because we know that whenever this bishop moves to e6, that's a free pawn, or something about that, and later our knight can jump even more and more. If they move this knight, it's also not great. Where do you move this knight? Like, what do you do with this knight? If you go knight f4 here, that creates the options for us to take on e5 and then to take on f4. And also we don't want to play bishop e2 because after knight f4 we don't have this sacrifice since they have this intermezzo move to take our bishop on e2. So engine is recommending here even to wait and play king c1 to see what they're gonna do. If they go bishop b7, then we can, maybe play bishop c4 since now bishop is not anymore on c8 and they cannot challenge our bishop with bishop e6. b5 never possible. This is always on target and we're always controlling this here. This bishop doesn't have good spot. If this knight start rerouting also, where this knight goes, because this pawn is always hanging. So yeah, it's game of waiting. You also want to place your bishop on h3, so that's another idea. When they go bishop e7, you want your bishop here. So I like these positions because it's about timing and also showing you how you generally understand these positions, and I think you can learn chess a lot from this, especially after finishing the game, because you're gonna analyze with yourself, your coach, with engines, and you will see the options, what you could do in the game. If queen a5, that's usually bad because when you reroute the knight, it's coming with tempo on c4, and in these scenarios, you're always better. So no problems with that. Also here, if they go queen a5, just go knight e2, b5 doesn't change much. You play knight b3. And then again, you're actually the fan of these positions because whenever they go b5, the c6 is even more and easier reachable, and you can simply target the pawn and have a lot of trouble for your opponent in the long term. Here, white is just better. Like, you have the same position as we have something when you play queen d6 here, but look at this position and look at this position. Like, there's a lot of weaknesses. You still didn't commit with g5, maybe you don't need. Your knight is better on b3, now it's controlling this stuff and we are just better. So that's the line that happens after g6 usually. I'm seeing also players are taking on d4, that's something I faced myself in one recent rapid game against one grandmaster in Serbia. In that case, simply take back with knight, and that's how they want to play. Philidor with g6, this is now a little bit popular. I've seen that in other grandmaster videos that this is maybe a little bit trendy now. h6, bishop f4, knight c5, f3. So you're having very nice game. The problem for them is after queen d2 they can't castle. But what they're relying on, they want to try to create some counterplay in the middle. But I think this is a bad version of any sort of Pirc because you're having your king in the center. So it's very hard to do anything on the other side of the board. Bishop e2 by long castles, white is totally fine, even for me better. So I think this line is not a problem, just to tell you, early takes. It's important to say you're not going g4 in this line, this is not what you want. It's important to remember that, okay, you played rook g1, you burned that move, but you also see what black wants in these structures. So h6 is popular move, and this is something I'm seeing very frequently. You go g4 anyway. And now after c6, bishop e3. So this pawn is not really stopping you of any g5, but the main point is they don't want to allow you typical on g5, where they need to play knight h5, and you have a very nice pawn there controlling the king side and squeezing the space. So at this point, like if they continue with something normal like bishop e7, a3 is a nice waiting move. Don't even care about a b5, but this is a nice move to stop later some b4 happening. And it's also a good waiting move to see what black will do with his camp. Like b5, you play h4. Knight b6, g5. When take, you take on e5. The point is now if they take back like this, and this is very losing for black because after knight takes e5, they're losing more important pawn. The point of g5 is just to create some, bait on the king side, and after take, there's a lot of problems for them, still hanging, and we can end up with pawn up here. That's why there is only move knight g4 here, which leads to some forcing positions where we lose the bishop on e3. Also, they need to trade the queens, and threatening here g6, they need to play g6 themselves, and now e5, allowing bishop f5, but after knight e4, they need to retreat the bishop, because they don't want to lose the piece, also the pawn. And there is nice plan now to put the knight on e4 and after castles to go rook d2, rook f2. So we don't have a bishop pair, but on the other side these pawns are very dangerous. And our knight can be amazing on these dark squares, followed by rook f2. According to engines, this is pleasant a little bit more for white, but these bishops can be dangerous if the things opens in the game. So I think this is the best line against rook g1 in the Philidor system. So that's why people are, not aware of this bishop e7 move order. A lot of them are just committing b5 too early, where we play just a3, queen c7, g5 early, takes. So h2 pawn is not really the point. After queen f3, we play the queen on g3, we castle long, take on e5, even got some ideas of f4. But the main point is, while the king is in the center, to attack this king, you are looking for sacrifices on f7, but once their queen is on g3, and also when you have additional support of your bishop and castle. So you are strictly slowing down your game here, preparing your attack. For them it's hard to castle anyway, because f7 is always falling. h2 was just bait for them to lose the time, and that's how we play. Also, h5 is one of the moves that makes a lot of sense here. They want to stop your g4, but to prepare it back, you are playing the move h3. And now early h4 here, like let's say c6, bishop e3, and now h4 just is not good because this pawn is also a weakness. We can always look for something like bishop g5 and just taking this pawn back. But what is even better, we can go knight g5 here, which creates a lot of trouble for their f7 pawn again. Bishop e7, we can take on e5. They take back with knight, and now just play queen d2. Our plan is to push f4, go bishop c4 alongside castles, and pretty much h4 was, I mean, at this point when you look now, the h3 and rook g1 was just bait to make this pawn forward to not stay on h6, so we can create our attack much easier. And if they castle short, of course, they're gonna be in trouble because they expose the pawn on h4. So that doesn't make sense. That's why they're keeping the pawn there. They're playing usually b5, a3, and now if they go h4, which is the best move in this position, since they're planning to castle long, they're like one move faster since they open up the bishop b7, queen c7 alongside castles. In this case, we would like to open up the g line for our rook this way. Anyway, we want our knight on g5, stopping their options for castling, and then to play queen to f3. So our rook is not the best here on g3, like we would like to have it on g1 and then queen on g3. But after bishop e7 alongside castles, we have another idea to play queen g2, take on e5, we can spend some move with king on b1, useful stuff, look for f4, and that's how we're gonna play this position. This bishop is anyway good piece on f1. Important thing to know about this rook g1 line is do not put your bishop on e2 in any scenario. Like this bishop is the last piece that you want to develop. Very important, keep the bishop there. You've seen also from the main line where whenever the bishop comes to e2, they just jump knight f4 in this g6 line. Let me just show you again. So yeah, exactly here. So when they go knight h5, if you go later bishop e2, it allows you with tempo to attack your bishop. So keep your bishop on f1. This is piece that stays almost for whole opening and middle game on f1. If they allow you to go on h3, you go on h3 and you have a nicer game. That's why also h4 is important. But yeah, when we talk about this variation h5, when they go b5, we go a3, and now let's say they play a6. They're usually, that's the way how Philidor players are doing it. Now we can take, they take back, and now g4. H takes, queen c7, g5. We are very aware of this move. Knight g8, because knight h5, it's a little bit risky. We have this, and then knight is a little bit out of the game. And also this move is allowing some rook h1 happening, and they have permanent problems with this knight here. So knight g8 is a must-played move, and now g6, f6 is the only move. And now there is a very nice novelty here. It's not played in any game, and I didn't see the idea such this, is to play queen b1. The point is just to go queen a2 and queen f7. I've never seen this myself, to be honest. and looks crazy to me. Very nice idea. If they go something like just ignoring your idea, bishop b7, you go queen a2, and alongside castles you go this another computer idea, rook g3. So it's not to support bishop h3, it's not to protect the knight or anything, it's to play rook to h3, to trade this rook, and then to have your bishop on h3. Like, totally crazy computer idea. Bishop d6 is kinda more convenient. You go a4, and on b4 you play knight e2. And then when they play knight c5, it says that you need to go queen d1. On knight takes e4, you go queen d3. On knight c5, you go queen f5. And apparently you are much better here in this position. Such a crazy stuff. Or maybe... No, not queen c4. You're going queen to d2. You're going queen to d2. And then I guess rook d1, and you provoke the center. There is a weakness. If your bishop ends up on c4, it's amazing. Such a crazy computer game. Okay, so that's about the Philidor rook to g1. It's very nice opening, very nice idea. And now finally, let's go to the Italian game. Italian game, to be honest, I still didn't, I don't still have courage to explain you this because I think that I don't have a good knowledge in Italian. I can play it myself, I did it too much. I have a lot of games in that. But not in the classical way how Hans is playing with a move now d3 followed by castle and this standard Italian strategical Italian positional. I'm playing the central attack, and this video you can also find on my channel about central Italian game, which is amazingly explained. You can check it out. Everything is very well explained here. I'm gonna just quickly give a look here. This is also inside the whole repertoire about Hans, because I want to put everything inside one's repertoire, which you can find in my description. I'm gonna leave the link there. It's a PGN course where you can find all these openings that are inside this video, and also the part of the previous video about Hans opening. But now, as the last thing of this opening and about this Hans course, I'm gonna explain this Italian again, and you can also find more in detail in the video on my channel. So the whole point of this central Italian attack is you want to play knight bd2, which is challenging your opponent in two ways. He can now go for the line of d5 and knight takes e4. I'm gonna show you in this video knight takes e4. The rest is in the special Italian video. Here d5, and how every game goes. People are just taking on d2 everything and then putting the knight on e7. I can tell you also from the other perspective, knight a5 is awful move. It's just leading to the same stuff, but imagine having the same position but knight on a5. At least knight can be much better on e7. So just don't be scared about knight a5. The only task you need to know is to play your bishop on d3. So when it comes to knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, we just take everything, and after knight e7 you play h4. The point of that is to wait and see what they're gonna do with their king. Usually if they commit castles before playing the move d6, when you go h5, h6, you have instant very strong move g4. You can attack this way just because there is no any tension still on the line. They didn't play rook e8. If they play rook e8, you castle long immediately. Like d6, you still don't even castle. The important inclusion here is rook g1. And now rook e8 doesn't make sense, you're gonna just castle long. So if they try something like c6, you go g5 immediately, and already they're in a big problem. Like they need to take, you take back with your rook. I think if you take with your queen, it's not working because of knight f5, challenging your queen, defending the g7 and opening the line. So that's why you take back with rook. C takes d5, you go back with your bishop, so you're targeting the king side. And now they still need to find very crazy stuff, very crazy moves, defense. f6, you go rook g1, rook f7, alongside castles, and something like this can appear in the game, which is totally crazy to me. Here you even sack the exchange, on the other side you get it back, and they have a lot of problem defending the king still. What is more natural to happen is after h4 to c d6, in which scenario you're still not castling, you're going for the move h5. h6 happens all the time. Now we just castle, they castle back, and now we play rook dg1. So I had a recent game on my live stream when I test out the Hans Niemann openings where I did play this line. The opponent went here to move b5, which is also the part of the game where I saw this opening, Caruana Hikaru Nakamura, very famous game. Bishop b3 is the move, and after bishop g4, knight h4. So here, I think in the game it was some queen d7 or something in my game, but in the Hikaru game is c5, then we play f3, takes, then g4, bishop g6, knight f5. It's total mess on the board, and white's attack is decent. There is no way to defend this. Hikaru tried with something like f6, then we play bishop c2 first before we take on g7, and when this happens, it's just not working for black at all. Like, this position is collapsing. And Caruana won the game apparently later. He entered some a little bit suspicious moments, but king was running, and I think they entered some rook endgame now, where white is completely winning. Yeah, so that's how the game ended. What people are usually playing is also bishop g4 move. There we go, rook h4. It's a very important inclusion. And now they have options of taking, which happens a lot of time, but it's practically not good because it opens the g line, and on queen d7 we have just this move. And here, if they are not aware how to try to defend, the game is over. Like, on knight f5 we play bishop d3, and pretty much we are threatening knight on f5, and on g7, king g8, we just take here. I think we take on f5 and then just go rook g7. Or actually there is rook g7 immediately, sorry, because after knight takes g7 we have queen takes h6, game over, and we are now again threatening bishop takes here. If they go rook g8, pause the video if you want to find the mate, but there is queen takes h6, knight takes h6, and rook to h7. So that's amazing. That's why on rook h4 people are more doing queen d7 here, but also bishop takes f3 is a popular continuation, which is a little bit harder now to attack, but now there is two options, queen f4 and queen to d4. Queen to d4 is more challenging because they need to find the move f5. If they go bishop to f5, then after g4, bishop h7, g5, queen to f5, bishop to b3, stopping checkmate, queen b1, king d2, all forced. Knight f5 looks like, oh, we are blundering something, but after queen c3, knight takes h4, and queen takes b1, we won the queen. Queen is trapped, as you see, and if they go queen f5 back, we can simply just take on h6, and the game is over. After this, king is totally safe on d2. The better option for them is to go, instead of that, to go f5 here, to defend the bishop this way, and now knight h2. b5 important inclusion, just because when you go back on b3, they want to vacate the square for the bishop on c2, on e2. So when you go bishop c2 now, you're still threatening g4, you want to open up the line, and then later on you have knight takes g4 and so on. So the game is like managed to defend this attack, but still looks very dangerous, and white's king is also very safe. To be honest, if you're playing against someone who is seeing this first time in their life, not aware of any sort of theory, I think they can even collapse much earlier. Somewhere here after h4 they can start making some bad moves. And also to tell you that if they castle here, which happened also in one of my game, after h6, like, white is totally winning, because they need to play g6, and then later they're gonna have lifetime problems on g7. You're gonna go castle, now you're gonna obtain the e line. There's a lot of problems around the king, and the game is simply over after allowing the gap with the pawn on h6, and that's it. That's why they on h5 they need to play h6 is the only move, and that's how they can try to hold the game. And the other videos about Italian, as I mentioned, is in the video on my channel. I'm gonna put the link in the description. And with this we finished the whole opening ideas, Caro-Kann, Pirc, Modern, Philidor, and so on. If there's anything else that's left, you can do a comment, let me know. And if you like this stuff, let me know what kind of repertoire I can copy from other players, popular players, so I can think about exploring their openings, get some experience playing, and then later on give you feedback like with these videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this PGN course about Hans Niemann, I'm gonna put the Hans code, Hans 2025, in the description, so you can get 20% of this course. I hope you like this one, and yeah, leave the like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.